championship here tonight, but what I'm going to talk to you about a little later.
There's nobody that exemplifies wanting to ride a motorcycle more than James. The very first time I ever met him, he was just a kid that came up to me at Mid-Ohio and came up and said, "Excuse me," introduced himself and said, "Is there any way that you'd be willing to help me? I want to get better as a rider." So I more or less back then told him, if you get yourself to this place, I'll have a floor for you to sleep on, hopefully, and you can stay with us, and we'll put you on a bike and kind of get you rolling and see how you do. And it's exactly what he did. James was the kind of guy that didn't care if he slept under a park bench. If he was going to be on a good bike, that's all that mattered to him.
In every way possible, James Rispoli is so different, and he has such a fight and desire to not only like be the best in the sport, but just to command the attention that he deserves.
So how that transformed was I was able to work with him a little bit here, and then he went on to some success on 600s and won a couple of championships there. His deal in BSB was a really unique one because I was racing World Endurance at the time and took him with me to be a reserve rider at the Le Mans 24 Hour. And one of the guys that was my teammate, Steve Mercer, was very, very close with Keith Flint, who was the lead singer of The Prodigy. And Keith, in England specifically, was so well documented of how much he loved road racing. I mean, he loved going and doing track days. He had great bikes. But he met Rispoli there at Le Mans at that 24 Hour that year. And they just hit it off. Next thing you know, Keith Flint says, "Hey, if you want to come do a stock 1000 race in England, I'll put a bike together for you at the end of the year." And a month later, we were over at Brands Hatch with him doing a race there, and that turned into the stint that he had over in BSB.
Talk about the silver bullet. I don't know what the silver bullet is, but can you bring up what the silver bullet is?
So El Tito, man, let's just go back real quick. He's just like one of those guys that would just kind of give you the shirt off his back. And to be honest, man, I was in a really crazy spot. I don't want to say I was depressed, but I had a little bit of depression in me. Like, I was not seeing the light. I was getting up at 1 o'clock. I was drinking bottles of wine. Like, it wasn't great. You know, I thought I was having a good time, but it turns out I wasn't. So luckily I had, you know, my buddy Steve and Tito really as a racer to kind of, I would go over his house, man, and dude, a lot of times I was Ubering over there. And I'd go over there and I'd just hang out, watch Supercross, kind of be like, oh man, like I want to get a motorbike. We'd go riding and stuff, and you know, and I was just like drilling him, like, dude, I don't know what to do. Like, and he's like, dude, you're not done. He always would tell me, you're not done, man. It's not done. Like, I don't know what we got to do, but it's not done. Like,
so in 2019, when he came over here, he was, you know, he was riding in one of his other buddies where he lives. You know, they got a couple cars, so he's borrowing vehicles, and I'm like, dude, you got a vehicle? And he's like, no, because in Europe, every sponsor gives you a vehicle. Like, they lease them and they just give them to you. And I'm like, yeah, that shit doesn't happen over here, bro. Like, nobody leases you a vehicle unless you get a super ride. Like, I don't even know if that ride exists in AFT, but.
At the time, my dad's been probably my biggest supporter my entire life. My dad was going through a massive deal with housing. He was moving into another house, he was renovating a house, and normally my dad usually can step in and kind of alleviate some pressure and, you know, can help with a plan. And at the moment, he was just buried with his own stresses, and I couldn't really get the attention nor did I want to, you know. I was 28 years old at the time, and I needed to be a man, and, you know, I kind of just didn't feel like, you know, when you kind of get in that little bit of a gray zone, dark zone, you don't really want to ask for help because you don't know what to ask. It really took the bridge of Tito to kind of go, hey man, like, James is floundering right now. Like, he's not treading real well, and maybe we should like try to have a conversation here before this kind of gets a little bit bad. Like,
the end of 18 when we started this whole thing, and beginning of 19, it was rough for him. Like, he was just coming back from, you know, British Superbike. Like, I mean, you can't get much bigger stage than that other than MotoGP. So, you know, he was living the good life, and it went away.
I kind of saw me being done racing, and I was fucking terrified, dude. Like, I've raced since I was a kid, and I've never had a real job, so I was like, what the hell am I gonna do? So, dude, it was tough, and Tito just bridged that gap, and ended up just pulling the trigger on the van, and changed my life, dude. And like,
I went out and bought a $1,500 van, you know, like a race van. I said it was a concrete contractor's van. It's a total piece of shit, like 100% POS. But I bought it, and my buddy Jeremy went and helped me from Appliances of Orlando. He helped me get it, and we brought it back. We put brakes on it and did a couple other things, and I'm like, dude, here. You know, I put it on the road, but we got it on the road, and I'm like, it's not nice, but it's something. You got wheels, right? And you can put a bike in the back, you can put a motorbike in the back, whatever you want to do. So we built a wall, you know, we kind of made it okay, and that's the silver bullet. It was a silver Ford F-250 van. It was a piece of crap. So, you know, I just, like I said, I tried to help him any way I could, and I'll always do that. You know, he's like a brother to me.
I was driving a $1,500 van, and I was embarrassed to drive it around people, and I was embarrassed to go to the moto track, and, you know, Breyer's a champion, all these guys are champs, and I'm like, dude, I rode out of Michael Jordan, arguably the GOAT. You know, he is the GOAT in basketball, out of the biggest rigs you can known to man, riding for one of the biggest, best athletes in history, and I'm driving a $1,500 van, dude, that I don't want anybody to see it. I used to hide it, and I used to do this, and then it clicked and said, dude, screw that, I'm gonna embrace this. And it took a mental, like, I embraced the van. I embraced the 6,800 miles we did to go to California to race a bike I knew I couldn't win on, just to try to just show people that I'll outwork them. And I remember, you know, that gap that he did, and he used to fly to the races in between his work so that we didn't have to spend money on flights, and we used to stay at hotels on his, you know, company, which is a no-no, but we got through it, dude. And he was there, man, the whole time, and he never took a penny, and he spent so much money on me. And I think just somebody believing and just him and Kieran just putting that money in, I felt like, I can't let him down. I can't let him down. I've got to outwork everybody. Tito was so crucial last year on just, I was scared to pull triggers. He wasn't. He just pulled triggers, dude, like we had a budget. We didn't have a budget. It was his money. And I owe him a lot. That money will never be able to repay, hopefully, this championship, and I can repay him in some other way. Dude, it was almost over for me. So it was tough. I remember I was on, like, I've got a therapist, Stefan Vossen over there, a sports psychologist that helped me go through the hardest part in BSB, and off the record, but, well, it's on the record. Like, dude, I was on the phone with him before I was going to Tito's house, bawling my eyes. I was saying, dude, I don't know what I'm gonna do, and I don't know what the fuck to do. I don't know how to change this reality. I just don't know. I can't, like, there's no rides. I can't, like, give up, because every time I touch a bike, I love it. And there's no avenue. But sometimes, that was me putting myself into that reality, man. And that's what happened. And so, you know, I've been down that road before, but I'm so glad we dug out of it, and I can help other people. You know, like, that's the biggest thing, is, like, I see all these, like, Whale and, you know, all these young riders, dude, like, coming up that, like, I'm like, dude, just keep going. Like, you don't know what's gonna happen in 3 months. So, yeah, I know I love it. It was a huge learning experience. I'm so glad I can tell.
Cool Skunk Kids. It started in 1999. A good buddy of mine, Bruce Lascala, who was doing some road racing team work with AMA, and I had gotten together, and we talked about being able to mimic, you know, the program that Nicky Hayden and Earl started, which was basically to come through dirt track onto road racing. And we recognized that that model absolutely worked, and so we were going to mimic that model, and I was going to work with the kids to bring them up. Bruce was going to be an AMA team, you know, running Super Sport and Formula USA at that time, and started it with all the local stuff in New England. The intent was never to try to make champions. It was, the whole intent was to give kids a way to look forward, see past their obstacles, know that if they wanted to be good, you know, as a racer, if they follow these programs, our program, that in the future that would be good for them, whether they're going to be a bricklayer or a salesperson, you know, a manager or whatever. Eventually we brought a small concept of the team close in. James was part of it in the early days, obviously, and then we had many of the older kids. And one of the ways that, you know, we developed motorcycles is that we brought on board kids that were in the above classes. And so I bought 250s and we did 450s. James was still on 60s and 80s. But when those kids finished with that part of the program in the higher classes, we had all the notes for James to go forward. So we always had, when James got on to the next classes, we always had everything already. We knew how that bike was going to react, how to set it up for a particular track. It was a great program. We loved it. It ended in 2008 when my wife passed away. And that was tough. You know, we just didn't have the stomach to continue to do it. We've always kept the name, obviously, and everybody remembers what it is. And then we were away from dirt track for 10 years until James came back, you know, 2 years ago to kind of see, really last year as a start, did a part of the series. But more importantly, I took a look at flat track again and got renewed interest, and we've made a commitment, James and myself, that we're bringing Cool Skunk Kids back. And so we're excited about that. We've made a commitment to our first young rider, which we're excited. And we're looking forward to seeing if we can, again, help the industry. We see such a positive thing going on out there, and we're really excited about it.
For me, I met James back in Amateur Nationals, probably back in 2004, if I had to guess. You know, James and his dad ran the Cool Skunk team, which was like every rider's dream to get on, which was so cool.
I was always a few years younger than him, being a little, what was it, 6, 7 years probably. Growing up, he was on this Cool Skunk, you know, 80s, 250s, moving up. And I was just an amateur kid still, like riding 50s back home. And never really got to know him at all. I was just kind of like knew the name, you know, the new Cool Skunk, and always heard of Phil Rispoli.
His whole mantra was the whole Cool Skunk team. You know, they came in, it was kind of like a gang, dude. There was like a bunch of these like New Englanders coming down to PA, and they're like, you know, what's up? We're gonna take this Northeast title. I said, not so easy, dude. You know, we just put them in their place real quick, but not.
With having like people like in this interview today, Breyer, Shayna, Jared Vanderkoy, who we didn't really even know because he's super young, Brandon Robinson, Chad Coase, obviously was a part of it, you know, all say they thought it was the coolest program and they wanted to be a part of it. But how does that kind of make you feel now to know pretty much all the top kids back then are now successful professionals, you know, would have loved to be a part of that program that were never a part of it?
Yeah, great. That's a tough one because I never thought it was that big. But more importantly, I never even thought about those kids. And the reason is that they all had it going on. You know what I mean? So, you know, their dads were either in it, you know, before, or, you know, they had all this support from good people on the West Coast with money. I mean, we didn't have money, you know what I mean? It wasn't like I was throwing money at anybody, you know what I mean? We were just creating an atmosphere to succeed. You know, that was what it was about. People always thought that, you know, I just had my hands in my pockets and they were stuffed with money, and all I did was throw money around the paddock or into my programs. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. The thing that I did is, in a very short period of time, I learned who were the best in the business, just like I do in any business that I do. And that's what we try to teach kids, is get around the best people, ask them how to do it. They'll tell you the shortest way to the top. And that's what Cool Skunk Kids was all about. It wasn't about a champion. You were fortunate enough to be a champion. PJ's fortunate enough to be a champion. Some others have come out and been champions from the programs. But that wasn't the program. We had no idea that any of that was happening. And sure as hell, I don't come out of the race business, so I know nothing about racing except what we learned, going through every step. But we did it quickly, we experimented, and our whole gift was to give it away. And I'm sorry, it tickles me that those kids today think that. Hopefully we get to bring it back.
My name is Ryan Barnes, and I race for Ryan Barnes Racing.
The depth of talent in the rosters in this series is unlike any before. On any given night in the production twins class, there's 5 guys who could contend for a win in any night, and there are so many talented riders. There is an incredible depth of talent in 2020, and the crazy thing is I see it just getting even deeper in 2021.
Yeah, coming into the season, I knew obviously James would be a strong contender. There's a lot of guys coming into the season I expected to challenge, but definitely James because of his background and he's always there. He's ready to compete. He's got a great team, and
so I honestly thought he would. I thought he would be one of the tougher guys, and like I said, having that year on the XG really helps, and I think it's showing.
RPMs are up, clutches are out. Dexter with the whole shot. Rispoli third. Here comes Barnes in fourth. Barnes has some pressure. Here comes J.R. Addison in fifth.
I think he was just that much further ahead of everybody else, and I think, like I said, once you kind of get that confidence, he's always been capable. Everybody's known that.
I figured James was going to be competitive because I know, once he was coming back to it full time, that he would probably get more competitive and stuff and want to go out and win. Last year was just a starting point for him, and I'm sure like everyone else, they want to go out and improve again. But I figured, he'd still be there. It's just he wouldn't be up front as much as he was. He kind of, I think, surprised a lot of people.
I think no matter what, if you're going into a season as the defending champion, you're going to be the favorite because you've proven already that you can do it. But as soon as I found out James Rispoli would be riding a Harley-Davidson XG750, he would not only be backed by Latest Motor Racing, but also have Joe Kopp in his pit, I immediately said he's going to do something this year. And that's what we talked about in all of our production meetings was, what will Rispoli be capable of with this incredible team behind him, because that's such a huge facet. Corey's an incredible racer. Corey is great on the bike, but the team that Rispoli has built and the energy in that pit alone and the mental strength in that pit is something that caught my eye from day one this year.
The start out of this front row, good start by last year's champ Corey Texter on the 1. That's James Rispoli of the Harley-Davidson. Barnes getting desperate here, so close to the title last year. He wants to win races. Rispoli, the former road racer, wants to win as well. And we're going down to the final corners.
Yeah, that little push up the inside got Rispoli in a defensive posture. Barnes sees that, goes around the outside.
Last lap pass, Barnes steals the victory at the opener. Rispoli bumped out there, ends up finishing second. Texter on the box. Last year's champ Corey Texter with a great start now.
Corey Texter changed to last year's motorcycle for tonight's race. We'll see if that's what he needed to get back to the front.
James Rispoli has a pair of seconds to start the year on his Harley-Davidson.
Coming into 2020, I was very confident. We already tested, we already did about 500 laps on these bikes, and Joe is really a big belief on you need to work on yourself before we work on the motorcycle. And I'm a big believer of that. And my last year in British Supersport, I took it on myself to say, listen, it's me, not the bike. And for me, once we kind of went through that role and then we went into Volusia and I got 2 seconds, I'm like, dude, again, the train keeps rolling from last year to this year. I can't win one. And it literally started kind of building a little bit. And Joe was like, dude, don't worry, it's coming. But I just kind of felt like I was letting everybody down. I was leading all the sessions and I was just losing. And I'm like, dude, get your shit together. Our biggest goal this year as a team was to not have a zero. Zeros lose championships. Fifths don't, zeros do. And the new format in AFT doesn't give you a chance for a zero because you only get one provisional. So if you don't make it out of the semi, your day is done. It's not like Super Twins where everybody makes the main. We have to qualify, and something as far as you have a mechanical, a clutch go, anything in a semi, you're done.
What happened between first and second earlier? Restarts. Look, you see this puff of smoke right there? Wow! Did Chad grab the brakes right there?
He had to, because it actually would have been easier for him to go to the outside instead of the inside.
Check this out. This will be crazy. It lets up right there.
We blew a motor in the semi, leading it with Chad, going back and forth. We went right to our backup bike, and I had to start dead last 17th. And the game plan was, listen, James, you got the pace to go, but you win this championship mode. Like, let's get as many points as possible, get through.
First, I want to point out, starting in the back, after an engine change, James Rispoli, and you'll see him way up top here early.
Rispoli all the way up to third.
When we kind of had the pace that we did, I was able to make really quick work, go from 17th to 4th in the first lap, and then to go and get second, almost win the race, was huge. That put more confidence in than the win did, honestly, because I just came from dead last on the Indy Mile and just caught you guys and ran you down. I'm like, oh, I can win.
So up next will be our empty side, presented by Russ Brown.
I mean, we know the low bike's better because we're there. We've been there. You know what I mean? We've developed the bike around the low bike. But my comments, even at Volusia, you know, it feels more nervous, but it's acceptable because it's a lot better.
The next day we took that kind of momentum. Vance and Hines took my bike, put an engine in that I used last year. It was one of the better engines as far as, it was just an old baby. It was the same horsepower as the other bikes. Let's not get carried away, but we did have that engine, and everybody knows bikes have a little bit of differences, and that just was my baby engine. It was freer, it was nicer, just in the hand, it was really nice, and I just liked it.
I hear him chatting the noise, move too quick, can't stop, let it happen. I hear him chatting the noise, not so tough, but let's keep rocking. Just too shy with the prize, white girls let it tell me I'm awesome, yeah. Act like fire on the pump, if you wanna touch my face, use caution.
Day 2 came around, we were fastest again, really, really good, blah, 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 and I remember in the main, Joe's like, dude, today's the day. Get out there, make it happen.
Normally in a mile, and normally in this class, the racing is close, but James Rispoli's been looking for his breakthrough win, and man, does he get it this time.
12-second victory for James Rispoli for his first victory in AFT competition.
I kept just hammering down, and my exhaust was echoing off the wall, so I thought people were behind me. So the thing is I just kept hammering. It was like 3 laps to go, I set my fastest lap of the race by myself, just hammering. And not until the last lap that I looked behind and I'm like, nobody's here. So I'm like, going back straight, I'm like, dude, what's going on? Like, nobody's here. I'm like, oh, dude, you're gonna win. Like, you're gonna win. All right, dude, just go into the last corner, just relax, just chill out. I go in there and I'm like, whoop, relax, dude. Like, you just did like all these laps and now you're like freaking out. Get through it, I ended up winning. I'm like literally rolling off down the straightaway going, where is everybody? And I'm like, what happened? And they ended up telling me, and I'm like, I couldn't believe it. And that was a turning point, man. The little bit of belief on just winning, the pressure of the winning, the relief, all that, the weight off the shoulders hit, and I knew we could win races.
So James Rispoli's win at the Indy Mile was a statement-making win. It not only shook the entire paddock, but I think it shook the sport because he'd always been a bridesmaid, never a bride, and he finally was able to pull it into victory lane, and it showed that they've not only figured out this bike, but James Rispoli figured out flat track racing again. He had already figured it out before he left, but now it's like he found his swing, he found his rhythm, and he was just feeling it that night. And to go out and have 12 seconds, a 12-second lead over second, that was like making up for lost time. And I think in that moment, it showed that James would be capable of far more than anyone would have thought in this series. He wasn't just going to squeak out a championship, but he would be a title contender.
Indy took everybody's eye off me and put it on the motorcycle. So I had no pressure. They thought the bike was the best, not me. And what that did was go, here you go, dude. Let me show you again. Let me show you again. And how many times do I got beat you for you to realize that it's me?
Yeah, I think that was the second night, I want to say, at Indy. I think I ended up 7th that night. We were having like electrical issues in the main, so I mean, I came off the track and I handed the bike to my dad, and he's just like, I'm gonna protest that Harley. He's like, it won by 12 seconds, there's no way it's legal.
Following James Rispoli's 12-second lead over second place at the Indy Mile, the entire paddock, but specifically Ryan Varn's team, protested his win. And I think no matter what, when you're winning by such a huge gap over the rest of the field, people are gonna have questions, but I think it was less of a mechanical question and more of a rivalry sort of question, because when he was protested, I remember we all gathered around the production tent and said we might have to interview Corey, and so we waited for the processing.
But if you look at that race, it was a 12-second win. If you looked at where we were, 2nd through 6th place, we were doing everything we could so he could win by 12 seconds. Like, we were bumping into each other. Like, breaking it down on paper, I think his fastest lap was only a 10th faster than mine. So it wasn't out of the ordinary once I broke it down that he won by that much. I mean, he rode good, he got out front, he checked out. So it was interesting. I was curious on if they would find anything, but I know Joe. I know he's a former champion or whatever, a well-respected guy, and James doesn't need to cheat or anything like that. So everything that happened with that, nothing surprised me. And yeah, I obviously knew they played fair. It was just trying to find that setup that got us close to where they were at was the challenge.
And I think it was because they were scared, because James came out swinging and he proved that with this bike and this team, they're capable of winning by a huge margin, and that scared people, especially on a mile, because if he can do that on a mile, where else will he be as dominant? He was able to get through tech clean, and it just, it shook the paddock. It literally mentally and physically shook the paddock. Everyone had to now raise the bar and play catch up with James Rispoli.
If they did do something, now would be the time to do it, because he just showed that he can go out and beat everyone by 12 seconds on a mile, which doesn't really happen too often, like let alone ever. So it was just raised a lot of suspicions, and I can understand like him pushing on wanting to do it, my dad. But in the end, I mean, I guess like I was okay with it too. Like I okayed it, but I mean it was just like we just had to, I guess, in a way. It just seems suspicious. And the bike, I think that he won on, blew up the night before, and we seen like people rebuilding it or putting it back together. I don't know if it was his latest team or if it was Vance and Hines. So I guess it would have been really easy to just like throw a different set of cylinders on it and make it over the legal limit, which was kind of the suspicion that we had. So we just kind of went for it, but it didn't work out, which is fine. So we knew that he was legal then, and that he just ran a really good race.
So riding is a psychological sport, and it's built on momentum. You're only as good as your last race, and so of course when Corey isn't on the top spot, when Corey isn't winning, that's the energy he's bringing into the next round. James Rispoli had a leash on that energy. No one else could touch it, right? So anytime that someone was coming into a race weekend, Corey Texter, Ryan Varnes, even Chad Kose, they knew that James Rispoli was the guy to beat because he had that energy and he had the momentum, and with racing being such a psychological sport, no one could touch him.
The 5 wins in a row was amazing, but people don't realize that a lot of those wins, Williams Grove both days, Springfield, we were on the back foot. Like day 1 at Springfield, we got 5th. We were like in the hunt, but we couldn't win. Day 2 was like a huge move that was kind of like me and Joe were like, dude, you got to lead it off 4. But then we went to Williams Grove, Corey's top dog, comes back firing, leads every session, smokes me by 1.4 seconds in an 8-lap race. Going into the main, I'm like, we're battling for second, like I got no shot at this. Breyer actually comes up to me, he goes, listen, I was watching him on the high line the whole day and I'm like, I just wish I could do that. And I'm like, dude, like, and he goes, listen, James, he goes, you got one shot at winning this race. You gotta go to the high. And he goes, I'm gonna give you one advice. You gotta get it there. Me and Joe, I said, listen, I'm going high and I'm making it work and that's where I'm living. And I remember it took about a whole 8 laps to kind of break Corey from it. His low line was so good and he was fighting, and finally the momentum of the high line worked and I ended up getting that win. But to win in Pennsylvania at Williams Grove, at arguably Corey's best track, was the momentum shift of this huge, for me to go, oh, I'm in your backyard now. And it wasn't like a cocky, wasn't that, it was just a momentum shift for me to go, oh, we can dig out of big holes. I'm kind of like, this is our worst race, man. This is our worst race. We're gonna be shit here. We're gonna suck at Williams Grove. All year I prepped Williams Grove, and then we won that one, and that was huge. And the second day, I was not nearly as bad during the day. I was like 1 or 2, and then I won my semi, and I ended up winning that night, and I was like, holy crap. And then we went to Dallas, same thing. I was kind of fast, and then like, those guys started getting quick again, and I'm like 3rd, 4th quick, and I'm like, man, like what's going on? And then like, the dark comes down and it gets to nighttime, and in the race we always find something. I'm a racer. I'm not a qualifier. Dude, when we're lined up, man, and I look over and it's game time, that shit fires me up. That fires me up, man, more than anything else. I want to race. I'm a ruthless killer, and when the visor is off and we're on, I want to be everybody's friend. You know, I'm kind of a class clown, but when the visor's down, man, dude, I want it. I want it.
Did you have a lot of pressure going into Daytona?
To be honest, all the pressure was at Charlotte. Charlotte was the big one. We could clinch in Charlotte, and Charlotte was like, I don't know what happened in Charlotte, but people were talking, a lot of things are coming up. It's the end of the year, talking about next year, this, you know, Harley, this, you know, Milwaukee, like, dude, just so much stuff was happening in a short amount of time, and to be honest, man, like, that was the pressure. It was all like just self-built, like, I gotta win, I gotta do it. Charlotte's gonna be good for the Harley. You know, I'm like, we should win, like, you know what I mean? And arguably, we got smoked. I got absolutely smoked at Charlotte, dude. And the main event, Corey shows up with this like huge hurrah, leads the race. I'm hunting him like I normally do. We get 10 laps in, and I'm just like, I can't close it. I'm out of tear-offs. I'm blowing like a beluga, popping out of the air. Dude, I am blowing air straight into my windscreen. I'm fogging, I'm wiping. I can't close this gap. And I'm like 15 laps in, Coast is now here, and I'm like, I don't know what happened. I just kind of get into like Hulk mode, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go. And I started changing my lines, and I was tight, and I was riding like this, and I was like, and I got smoked. And after that, all the pressure went away. After that, we came out the next day. I watched the race, and I knew exactly what I needed to do on Saturday. We came out, we fast qualified. The bike was really good. I was like, ugh, dude, like if you're gonna lose this, might as well lose it with a win. And so I just was like, what are you doing now? And I went back to an attack mode. And it ended up getting rained out, which is, you know, kind of stinks for the championship because it really gave him the shot for, if he won again, it would have went down to 28 instead of 38. And then we came here with 38 points. We knew what we needed to do here, and there was no pressure. I had to attack. Harley Davidson gave me a motorcycle right before here, and I haven't drove my van pretty much the whole time, and that cleared my head. It's probably the only thing I can multitask is on a motorcycle, and I rode it for 2 days before I came in here, and to be honest, man, it was the best 2 days that I've had all year. You know, not thinking about racing and all that, and I came into Daytona with zero pressure, man, like zero, and it felt awesome, and we did what we needed to do, and I was quick here in Daytona. I won my semi, and to be honest, it was a great way to end.
I'm team owner of Latest Motors Harley-Davidson and also Latest Motors Racing. Boy, I think a key to a successful team, and I use that word pretty strongly, team, is you can have a good rider, you can have a good motorcycle, you can have good background support or a lot of money, but if you don't have a team that's a cohesive team that works well and meshes well together, you got to have all those pieces clicking, I think, to win a championship and to really be a contender. So these people I've worked with for many years, and I think we've got a very, very tight, well-functioning, but small team. And I think that's made us effective.
I think a big part or reason for James' success this year was the people that he surrounded himself with. And not to toot our horn as a team, but we've got a bunch of non-ego driven people that know their jobs, and we're not afraid to check each other's jobs. So when you're surrounded, and there are a lot of positive attitudes, when you surround yourself with people like that, it makes it fun. And when you're having fun, a lot of times good things happen. And that's kind of what I've seen with James this year. He's a very positive kid, and surrounding himself with people like that, it'll go.
This can do. Let's see if the 43 Rispoli can wrap the title. Let's go racing at Daytona. Looking to lock this title. He only needs to finish 7th, but Chris, I think he wants a podium here. He's fighting for it. James Rispoli takes 4th, and he is going to be your champion for 2020.
Dude, it feels great. You know what I say, man? Wins are a very huge high, but as soon as you roll the clock over 12:01 a.m., everybody forgets. The championship's stamped. I'm a champion. It took me 10 plus years to get another one, and I have 3 to my name, and every one of them means a lot, and I learned a lot from my first 2, and this one, I really, truly enjoyed it, and I didn't allow the seconds and the fists and the force ruin my year, and I couldn't have a better team to do it with, where nobody, it was so low pressure, and to be honest, it feels amazing.